Doesn't work that way, unfortunately. If only it were that easy. That actually delays the development of an employee when you try to put too much information in front of them at once. It's just going to delay their development. So let's talk a little bit about coaching. So one of the things I love about what I do is I get to tour the country, go meet with customers in their office, and frankly, my favorite place to be when I visit a customer is right on the sales floor. I'm a salesperson at the end of the day. I love rolling up my sleeves and going elbow to elbow with the reps or the recruiters, and I love listening to them and hearing the words coming out of their mouth. That's where it happens. We can get in a boardroom or a conference room and talk strategy all day long, but at the end of the day, this is a sales business. And so I often ask managers, so tell me about your coaching and how often do you coach? Oh, I coach all the time. I'm always coaching my people. Fantastic. Tell me about that. Well, whenever I come out of my office or my office is out in the cube, I hear my reps or my recruiters on the phone, and when they hang up, I kind of just tell them what I heard. And so that's when I kind of roll my eyes internally. I don't share that with them. This is where I have to put my coaching hat on. And so before we talk about what good coaching looks like, let's first make sure that we understand the difference between feedback and coaching. So if I hear a rep on the phone and I say, hey, I heard that call, nice job, next time do this, or here's my feedback, that's not coaching. So feedback tends to be reactive. It tends to come from a place of scrutiny and telling people what they're doing wrong. And there's not really a lot of thought put into it, but probably most important of all for all of you as leaders, it's not going to change behavior. Feedback does not change behavior. Coaching, on the other hand, is much different. Coaching is proactive, it's strategic, it requires planning, it focuses on the future, and it focuses on it focuses on the what-if possibilities. It's really about taking an employee down a path of self-discovery and helping them maximize their talent, essentially. And a big part of that, what we teach or what we encourage, is good coaching really comes from leading with questions rather than telling, right? Because especially in this day and age, nobody wants to be told what to do. My manager tells me what to do, I'm just going to roll my eyes. But if we lead with questions, that's how we can start to empower. So what does good coaching look like? So the first thing is questions the manager asks of his or her employees. So this, by far and away, is the most impactful way for you to drive change on behalf of your account executives, the people in your office. The questions that you ask, and they need to be good questions. They need to be thought-provoking questions. Because the questions that you ask of your people is what's going to drive behavior. So if you're constantly just telling them what to do, then again, it just doesn't change behavior. So you have to actually lead them with questions, ask them good questions, and then that's what's going to drive the change. That's what's going to shape their thought process, especially if you continue, if I have a sales rep and I've rolled out this methodology for creating call plans, and we get to a point in our coaching sessions where every week or every coaching session, the sales rep knows I'm going to ask, hey, show me 3 call plans for this week. Walk me through with this prospect you're going to call on. Walk me through what you're going to say to build credibility. Walk me through your value proposition. If you consistently ask that, that's going to drive the behavior to make sure that on every call going forward, they're planning out a call plan and they know what they're going to say for their value proposition or how they're going to build credibility or whatever it's going to be. But if you don't ask about it, it's just going to fall by the wayside and they'll never adopt it. This next one, I could probably do a whole presentation on this next bullet point. The manager's ability to model the desired sales behaviors. This is absolutely critical. I got several stories I could share on this topic. I'll share one quick one with you. I had a customer, this is going back a couple years, asked me to come in, and we were working on a project to basically re-architect their sales process across the organization. And in the midst of that conversation, we started talking about sales methodology. So sales process basically maps out all the steps that a sales rep and a buyer have to do for a deal to go through. Methodology really defines the behaviors and the tasks that the sales rep is going to execute on to compel the customer to take those steps. So this customer, we got on this conversation. They wanted to implement the Challenger sales methodology. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But one of the core tenets of their methodology, and it's a great methodology, is they talk about the concept of educating the customer. And you got to position yourself as an authoritative leader and educate them. And they were talking about that. And so I finally, I stepped in and I said, well, let me ask you something. Because their challenge was they weren't getting adoption out on the field with it. I said, who here in the room? We had the head of sales and her 4 VPs for the 4 different regions and the CEO in the room. And I said, who in here can actually model this behavior? Nobody's hand went up. And so I'm like, well, there's your answer. If you guys can't model the behavior, how can you expect anybody out in the field to do it? I'll give you another really good example. How many of you in here are tracking and measuring the number of new face-to-face appointments your account executives get? I don't know if that's something that you track or not. So a few of you. So for most staffing companies, that's like the holy grail of metrics. And so I hear time and time again managers, kind of complain, yeah, my reps can't get out of the office. They can't get enough face time. They're not getting enough meetings. So they look at their sales report and the activities for the week or the month, and they say, Dan, I'm looking at your activity, and I noticed that you've only averaged 4 appointments for the past 3 weeks straight. I need you to make more phone calls to get more meetings. And to that, I just laugh and I roll my eyes, and I say, that's just a waste of a conversation, because when the sales rep hears that, he or she's just thinking, well, gee, thanks, boss. Tell me something I don't know. What the sales rep needs to hear, the account executive needs to hear is, show me how to get more meetings. So you've got to be able to model it. I'm actually getting ready to launch a training program for a new customer. This literally just happened this week. Big sales team. The executive vice president, we've talked for 3 weeks about the importance of driving adoption, the role that leaders play in the role that the leaders play in training, and the executive vice president on the conference call says, yeah, I'm not going to go through the training. So I've got to have a separate conversation one-on-one with him and the CEO. So if you're not going to go through the training yourself, if you can't take the time to commit to understanding it, then you're probably wasting your time and money putting your employees through it. Acknowledging the need to improve job performance. So, and then let me just bring up this other one, and self-realization or self-awareness that the learner, self-realization of what the obstacle is. So here's another really important one. This is coaching. So in that example I gave a minute ago, my manager comes to me and says, hey, Dan, you've only averaged 3 appointments for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Make more sales calls to get more appointments. Happens everywhere, and not just in our industry, with sales organizations all over the world. So then that conversation ends. The manager and the rep get together the following week or a couple days later. The manager looks at the report, the metrics, and says, gee, Dan still isn't getting any more meetings. I don't understand. We just had a conversation about this last week. The problem is the manager never brought me to the self-realization of what the real obstacle is that's holding me back from hitting the metric, in this case, getting meetings. So just like in sales, when you go on a discovery call and you're trying to create an opportunity and you ask some probing questions to uncover a pain point or a point of dissatisfaction with a prospect, you got to get them to admit what their pain is before they're going to be willing to sort of be open-minded to hear what it is you have to offer. We have to do the same thing with our salespeople. So good coaching requires us not just to lead with questions, but we got to lead with questions to bring the employee to their own self-realization of what the obstacle is that's holding back their performance. Only then will they buy into the solution. And by doing that, by bringing them to their own self-realization of what the issue is, they're going to feel much more empowered to work on developing that skill rather than you just telling them, go do this or go do that. We see this sort of missed time and time again. So that requires really peeling back the layers and getting into the details with coaching your account executives. And then, of course, there has to be a belief that the new skills and change in behavior is going to actually help the person, the individual. And then lastly, practicality. So, and I kind of touched on this, but we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for our learners to adopt and implement ideas and skills. And that kind of comes back to, I'm going to touch on this in a second, but sort of one skill at a time. It's very easy for us as leaders, most likely all of you as leaders, owners in the room, you're probably the best salesperson and or best recruiter in your office, and you've probably been doing this for years and years. So when you hear one of your employees on the phone or with a customer or candidate, it's probably very easy for you to point out umpteen different things they can improve upon. We got to bite our tongue, though, and just focus on one and make it practical and easy. So, how many of you follow a coaching cadence, a regularly regimented coaching cadence with your people? A couple of you. Awesome. That's great. So this is a real simple sort of template, if you will, that you can follow, and I'll just explain it. So what we do, what we encourage, or what we teach for managers is, so at the first of the month, the leader or the owner, he or she goes and pulls all the data. So I assume and I hope that you guys are making decisions off of data and doing data-driven coaching rather than off of gut instinct. But you pull the data, whatever metrics it is you're tracking on your account executives, print out a copy for yourself, print out a copy for the account executive. In the morning, give it, the first of the month or the second of the month, give it to your employee and let him or her go and study it and ask them, essentially what you want them to do is you want them to self-diagnose themselves. You want them to take a look at it and essentially self-diagnose kind of what's going on in their business. And within that, so as they look at their data and where they're down or where they want to, you want to encourage them to identify an area for improvement. But when they look at the data, like maybe their interview to hire ratio or submittal to interview ratio is low, we want to encourage them to think about what's the one skill you want to work on to improve that metric. We, as leaders, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through the same exercise. Then in the afternoon, we're going to actually meet with our rep or our account executive, and we're going to share notes, and we're going to have a coaching conversation. And we're going to decide what we're going to, what we've come up with. So we're going to co-create a plan. And then for that month, what we're going to do is we're going to just focus on one skill, 2 max, depending on what the one skill is. And then we'll meet each week, and we're going to talk through how we're improving that skill. And the development plan is also going to include what activities that we're going to do as a subordinate and as a manager. So maybe it's listening to calls, listening to recorded calls, doing role play. It could be a variety of different things. And then, I don't know if it's applicable for maybe for some of you in your offices, if there's an owner and then you have a VP and a director. The idea is that would also happen between not just the manager and the rep, but then between the manager and the director and the vice president. So that way we have total alignment and everybody's on the same page and we all know what the learning and development plan is for that rep for that month. So from there, we want to sort of peel back the onion a little bit deeper. So when I say diagnose the skill issue and start at the top, what I'm referring to is the top of your sales funnel. So do you guys have a clearly defined sales process in your CRM or ATS? Would you? Yes, no, maybe, kind of, sort of? Okay. So really, really important, you have a clearly defined sales process that includes exit criteria. Anybody know what I might mean by exit criteria? I see a couple heads nodding. So exit criteria basically means, or I like to use the term quantifiable outcomes. So you want to make sure that the exit for each stage of your sales process is quantifiable, measurable, and observable. And it should be crystal clear when your customer has completed certain tasks or events, it's clear for your account executive that we've left stage 1 and we're now going into stage 2. So in any event, start at the top. So here's just an example of what it might look like. So in this instance, if I'm a manager and I've got a rep and the top of their funnel, we're looking at number of leads worked and then converted to qualified. And let's just say hypothetically the goal or the objective is to convert 10 leads a month or 10 leads a week. And they're only averaging, my reps are only averaging, 3 or 4 a week. I got to start thinking about, well, what are some of the reasons for what might be holding them back from converting more leads? And you see some of the potential causes over there. Maybe they're getting people on the phone, but they're getting stuck with objections. Maybe they're calling the wrong people. Maybe they're not getting into the right questions. There could be a variety of reasons. So the point is, we as leaders, we need to diagnose it, think about these questions, and then those are the questions we're going to want to lead our account executive through to help him or her self-diagnose where the issue may be. So it's a self-discovery process. This is what good coaching looks like. This is what data-driven coaching looks like. And this is what it looks like to actually coach to your sales funnel. Again, typically what we see with managers in the industry is they tend to want to just track activities. Just tracking activities is good, but just tracking activities without tracking whether or not they're moving their prospects down the funnel and their opportunities down the funnel kind of defeats the purpose. So you need both. All right, so I've shared a lot with you in a short period of time. Hopefully you're still at 80 or 90% retention. So the question becomes why? So I ran a branch for years. I ran multiple branches. There's nobody that appreciates your guys' role more than this guy right here. Now, no, I was never an owner, but I actually loved being a branch manager. I thought it was a ton of fun because you have your hands in everything. And that's the good news, bad news about your role. You get to touch a lot of things: sales, recruiting, candidates, customers. You got operations, you're managing your P&L, you've got corporate, you've got a million things going on. You're stretched in 18 different directions. And so you're probably thinking right now, when in the heck am I going to do all this? I'm already working 60 hours a week. And so why? Why would I want to do all this? And so here's my pitch for you, why you want to do this. So your mission as an owner, it's not just to hit quota. You guys are trying to build a predictable and scalable business and a predictable and scalable sales organization. Your goal and objective is to have predictable revenue. And here's the thing, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. So most of our customers are IT staffing customers. We work with other staffing companies and other verticals, of course. In the IT staffing space, 80% of IT staffing companies are $20 million or less in revenue. I don't know what the percentage is from 20 million to 100 million, but I can tell you, Sherry mentioned at the beginning, I worked with about 400 different staffing companies. 98% of them fall between 0 and 100 million in revenue. And here's the thing, 98% of them still haven't figured out how to scale their business. And the reason is they all have the superhero model. The superhero model is basically they've got 80 or 90% of their revenue coming from one or two key performers, typically the manager or the owner, and they haven't figured out what makes them successful and how to take what makes them successful and make that replicable across their organization. Everything I'm talking about this morning is all about designed, and the intention is to share with you and to help you guys figure out how to make this replicable across your organization so that you can actually grow at scale. And so let's talk, let me just finish by giving a couple of examples of what that looks like and what that means. So if you look at McDonald's, Ray Kroc, you can go into any McDonald's anywhere in the world, you're going to have the exact same experience. You're going to taste the same crappy hamburger everywhere you go, or good, maybe you like McDonald's. And the thing with Ray Kroc, though, he actually he mapped out and designed his whole sort of assembly line of how you're going to build burgers and build out the franchises and so forth, or the stores, way before he had demand for 35,000 stores. He thought about that way in advance. And so you guys should be thinking about what is the infrastructure and the model that you need to have in place so that you can start plugging people in and you can grow at mass scale. Another one, kind of similar scenario, is just look at some of these celebrity chefs. I think it's amazing. So you got Emeril Lagasse or Bobby Flay or who's the Gordon Ramsay. These guys have high-end restaurants all over the world. Now, obviously, they don't have 35,000 chains like McDonald's, but what's amazing is you can go into any one of their restaurants, New York, London, San Francisco, and you get an amazing meal. They're not in all those restaurants at once simultaneously, obviously, though. They figured out how to replicate and scale their business, which I think is pretty impressive. The other example I like to go to is college sports. And Duke and Alabama, I think, do a really good job of sort of exemplifying this. And I'm not a fan of either. But if you look at Duke and Alabama, and I suspect we have some sports fans in here, yeah? Show of hands. A few. So Duke and Alabama, year in and year out, they are competing for championships. I mean, Alabama's in the college football playoff, it seems like every year. Duke's, always in contention for the Final Four. Now, yeah, they hire top talent. They do a really good job of that, and we heard earlier about, it's really important to have a profile, and you want to hire consistently and hire that profile consistently. That's going to help you have a scalable business model. But remember this, they've got turnover every year. Their kids are one and done going to the NBA. They're taking off and going to the NFL. They have injuries. So what's amazing and impressive about what Saban at Alabama and Coach K at Duke's done is they've got a system down. I mean, it's a science in terms of what they're doing. So they're not overly dependent or overly reliant on any one employee, or in our case, we don't want to be overly dependent on any one employee or any one customer for that matter. And so those are, I think, good examples of what scalable, replicable, repeatable mean. And I think that's what I suspect, or I would hope that's what all of you are striving for as you're building your business and building your offices in your markets. So I kind of just got rolling there. Sorry, I haven't really kept a close eye on time, but I'm gonna open it up for any questions that you guys have, and hopefully I have some good answers for you.
Thanks, Dan. The question that I had was just in regards to when you talked about the kind of the monthly reviews that you do. You talked about the sales manager as well as the owner or president being in alignment. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more, like just between maybe the director and the manager?
Yeah. So the director, and this ties back into earlier I was talking about the questions you ask of your people is going to drive and shape behavior. So the director should be asking the manager, what's your learning and development plan this month for sales rep number 1? What skill are you going to work on? What tasks and activities and exercises do you have planned for the month? How are you going to track and measure success? And that way, the manager now knows that he or she's going to get the question from the director every month about each of their employees. So that's going to drive the manager to actually have that to have that cadence for that coaching framework, if you will, with each of his or her employees. Did that clarify?
That was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Any suggestions on motivating people that are underperforming to their potential but are comfortable with the production that they're giving? So they're adequate, but they have the potential to be really good, and they're just comfortable in what they're doing, and any attempts to get them out of their comfort zone kind of they move backwards instead of forwards.
Yeah. Are they coachable?
I'll just leave it at
So the challenge, what's their self-awareness? So if they don't have a high degree of self-awareness, folks tend not to be so coachable. But I bring it back to, so we talk about two things with motivation. There's motivation where you can manage with the carrot and use incentives. And the problem with that is that tends to wear out because there's always going to be another company down the street that can offer bigger or different incentives. And it puts the burden on the back of the manager. So I think where true motivation comes from is back to empowerment. So what people really love is they want autonomy. And so obviously I have no idea how you coach or manage or develop your folks. But again, I've already said this kind of repeatedly, leading with questions, allowing people to come up with new ideas, allowing them to question how things get done, that makes them feel like they have the autonomy, and that actually starts to build confidence. And helping them grow. Along the same lines, I don't know where you're at. It sounds like you might have an employee specifically in mind. You might just have to have a heart-to-heart conversation with him or her. And where's your head at? And kind of level set from that standpoint. One other thought on that: when you hire a new employee, really, really important that like day one, certainly week one, you want to set clear expectations for what the coaching relationship's going to look like. So for example, if Sherry's my new employee, I'm going to sit down with her, and basically a conversation I'm going to want to have with her is, so Sherry, how would you define my role as your coach? Tell me about your experience being coached in the past. What did you like? What didn't you like? What worked? What didn't work? What motivates you? What demotivates you? Sherry, when we hit a bump in the road, and inevitably we will because we're in sales and that's just life, you'll probably get in a rut. I've been in many ruts. When you get into a rut, how do you want me to approach you? How do you want me to motivate you? So you have that tough conversation up front, so that way when you get in a scenario like this, you've already had the conversation.
Yeah, hi. You touched on superheroes in your presentation. Great presentation, by the way. Can you outline some key characteristics of those superheroes and really what makes them successful in your in all your travels and studies on this topic?
Sure. Well, coachable's one. So are they open to coaching? And you can test that in the interview process by doing a role play with them and actually try to do some coaching just to see how they react. But coachability is one. I mentioned self-awareness. I think that's important. A couple of other ones, I think fear of conflict, rather no fear of conflict. So, and you can pull that out on doing, like we use the Divine, so there's different assessment tools out there. But fear of conflict is a really important one, or no fear of conflict, I should really say, because sales is all about conflict. You can have tough conversations with your recruiters about their candidates or the quality of the candidates. You guys, I think, are working more of a full desk, so that might not come into play. But think about it when a client pushes back. You don't want to hire somebody that's just going to walk away and be a pushover. So that's another characteristic. Another one is you got to be comfortable discussing money. It blows me away. People that go in sales, when it comes to talk about money, they want to avoid the conversation. Those are some others. And then I would just say, they got to have the fire in the belly and competitive. Be really, really competitive and persistent. So when they get rejection or get hung up on, are they going to pick